Okay guys, we're here. We're going to install our new plate style interior bar. After you've taken everything apart, made sure all your components are there, read the instructions, the first step will be to install the actual plates that mount along the inside of the kick panel. So these plates have a notch cut out to clear the dash mounting bracket and the door limiting strap, but you will have to remove those during installation. So I have a tub here for mock-up to show you guys, but you'll want to remove those L brackets that mount the dash and the door limiting strap. Next thing you'll want to do is go ahead and loosen the two outer bolts that hold the dash and the center screw and shift that dash side to side if necessary to get an even gap between the dash and the door pillar flange where this plate is going to slide in. I've seen, when Ford assembled these, a lot of times the dash is slid all the way to the driver's side or possibly all the way to the passenger side. So you want to even that up. And then once that's done, you can go ahead and slide this in place. I'm not going to put the spacer plate in right now. I'm going to install that later. This spacer plate is used because the kick panel tapers away from the edge of the door pillar here. So that takes up the void between the kick panel and the mounting plate. To help with structural integrity. There's also a small spacer you can see here for the lowest mounting hole. So we'll slide this in place. Some tools that I use during this time are either a level, or what we like to use here is some digital degree finders. And then I just have a Sharpie to mark my holes I'm going to be drilling and two small clamps if necessary. Usually it's a pretty snug fit. So I'll slide this in, make sure that this is running level with the door pillar, and then this is running perfectly up and down, perfectly vertical. So I'll put my degree finder on, make sure that that is running the same degree as the bottom one, and that it's going to clear and that everything's going to mock up fine. Then I'll go ahead and mark my holes and drill them. I'll show you guys after we do that. Okay, so I have this in. It's held in place. You can see that I'm very close to, degree-wise, I'm a half a degree difference. So actually less than that, I'm a quarter degree of difference. So my next step will be to mark my holes. You want to make sure that this vertical flange of the interior plate is inboard of this just slightly. And then you can see here, one other thing that I like for aesthetics is to have this running parallel with my dash. And then this is a nice parallel line with the quarter panels just running level with the Bronco. So when doing so, I'm going to kind of feel and give myself an idea where this hole is going to come out. On the inside, I'll mark holes, but basically when you drill, it should come just in front of this flange. Obviously, I don't have my fender on, but even if you have your fender in place, you can reach your hand back in there. It's very accessible. And I'm going to go ahead and mark my holes, and then I'll drill through with a pilot hole first, a very small pilot hole to make sure, it's not shifted. I'm not hitting this flange, and if you do hit this flange slightly, it's not going to hurt anything. And then you just want to be this way enough to put a large flat washer to give it some integrity. So we'll go ahead, mark the holes and drill it, and I'll come back to you guys. Okay, we're back here with the installation of the new plate style interior bar. So when we left off, I had put the inner support plate in place, marked my holes. I've gone ahead and drilled my holes out first using a very small 1/8 inch pilot hole, made sure that everything looked like it was going to clear the passenger side vent box if you're reusing that, and also clear that flange. I went ahead and drilled the holes out to a 7/16 size. You are using a 3/8 grade 5 carriage bolt to mount this in 4 locations along the kick panel here, but by doing a 7/16 hole, it gives me a little bit of movement. My angle finder is still at 0, so it's running perfectly level. You can see the carriage bolts are in place. Sometimes, those are cut out with a Plaz. They're a square hole, but sometimes it is necessary to take a file, clean up the corners, just to get that carriage bolt to seat properly. And that's going to help you during installation, having that carriage bolt. Plus, it gives it a nice smooth finish, clean look down here. If you're to powder coat it, possibly, whatever color, paint match it, you can always do the heads of those carriage bolts as well. I did go ahead and install the spacer plate. You guys can see what I'm talking about here. This is the spacer plate. You can see me moving it back and forth. So you just kind of hold that in place, pass a bolt through. It should fit with the profile of the main plate. If you look at it, these are the 3 holes that are used that the bolts pass through. This hole that is closest to the thin material here, instead of having this larger gap right here, this one, that goes to the top, and that gives you the correct profile so it's not protruding in any direction. You can see it is pretty close to the passenger side kick panel mounting locations, but I'm sure all that will pass through for the heater box. Everything will be fine. You know, knowing that I've mocked these up before, as long as you're clearing those, you should be just fine. We are clearing our door limiting strap holes and our dash mounting bracket holes as well. So now that that side's done, I'm going to go ahead, take some measurements on my gap here from the leading edge to the edge of the plate, and also from my dash here, right in this location. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other side and try and get everything to match up so it's just aesthetically pleasing, so you have the equal gap from side to side. And then after that, I'll start assembling the actual roll bar portion. One thing that I do want to state is, you know, this is a very snug fit right here between your dash and this flange. I have had to take and bend this flange just slightly open. You know, also, I would install your lower door seals, get everything nice and tight prior to putting these in, and then slide these in. Or on a few Broncos, I've sectioned off the rear portion of the lower door seal right in this area here where it gets real tight, so it doesn't wrap around. It just, you know, adheres to this outer edge. The lower portion, usually you have enough gap because of the standoff, that space, to get your door seal in and not worry about it. But I'm going to go ahead, start mocking up the other side, and I'll get that kind of bolted in, and then I'll start on the roll bar assembly portion. So we're back here at the Bronco. We're done installing the passenger side of our new plate style roll bar, and I've gone ahead and mocked up the driver side. One thing that I've done, I've made sure that this is running 0 degrees again, like I did on the passenger side, and then I've measured the distance off the dash on both sides to ensure that they're equal with one another and that everything looks symmetrical. This is clamped in. I'm going to go ahead, make some marks, drill my holes, and get this bolted in. One thing I did do is I attached the next vertical piece where our crossbar is going to be, just with 2 of the carriage bolts. I've gone ahead and mocked that up, made sure that we're clear. The inner piece is slightly less in size than this outer piece. The reason for that is as it slides up and down, if you have a dash pad, this is slotted, so you can slide it upward to clear your dash pad, you can slide it down. This is kind of the part that is going to be the most customized for people, depending upon what they have. So at this point, I would figure out if it's going to clear your dash pad. If you're not running a dash pad, I'd slide it down as far as possible, maybe even trim off a little more here. Then go ahead and make it fit the contour as tight as possible so it's as clean and as low profile as possible. I'm going to go ahead, drill the holes, mount this plate, mount this in, and I'll show you guys the crossbar when we come back. So, after installing the side plates on our plate style roll bar, the next step will be to install the main cross brace that ties the 2 plates together. I've measured from the top of our main side plate to the inner adjustment plate and made sure they're even side to side, gone ahead, tightened them down, and then I put a level across my dash and made sure that dash bar is running the same angle. You know, each Bronco is going to have a little tip to it, so my main thing is the aesthetics from outside, making sure if you look from through the front windshield that bar is running even with the Bronco, so there's an even gap across. This, you'll probably need a couple extra hands to do this, but once that's tacked in, you can go ahead and start assembling the rear portion, and then the last step will be to do our front legs that come down, because that will be determined on the space from our rear portion to that front bar. So my next step will be to go ahead and get the rear portion mocked up. All right, we're back here at the Bronco. We're installing our interior plate style roll bar kit. What I've done is I've mocked up the whole front, the plates are in, the dash bar's in. Now I'm going ahead and working on the rear section. And when doing the rear section, the main thing is to make sure it's nice and square. You want the vertical pieces of the rear hoop and the center hoop running perfectly straight up and down. So I put my degree finder on there, make sure they're running perfectly straight up and down. The rear hoop is going to have the kick forward, like the factory hardtop, the contour of that. And then the center hoop is going to kick rearward to clear the driver and passenger head, give you some space there. One thing you want to be aware of is you want the plates to be spaced off just slightly from any of the locations, side to side, front to back. The reason for that is if you have to take the cage out to either have it coated or painted, you know, when you're sending it in and out, you're going to have some room to do so. Also, if you notice here, as the bar comes down, it's not necessarily centered on the plate. I have it kicked back to the far outer corner on both sides. And then I go ahead and I measure off my tub to the bar, making sure everything is equal from side to side. Make sure everything is square front to back. Go ahead and tack it together. I put a ratchet strap across with a center bar to hold everything in place. It does help to have a couple extra hands, you know, when you're getting this squared up, definitely. Once this is done, I'll go ahead and put my main crossbars in and tack those in, measure them from side to side, make sure they're equal. And then once the rear portion is all together tacked up, I'll go ahead and start on my front A-pillar bars that go over the driver and passenger head and down to our dash bar. So I'm going to get these crossbars put together, tacked in, and then I'll come back and show you that. All right, one thing I wanted to touch on was these rear crossbars. They're cut at a miter cut, as you can see when you receive them, and they'll slide in. So after tacking in the center bar, just to give myself the space, the length of this center bar should be 27.5 inches overall. Once that's in and my rear hoops are installed, I went ahead and I started trimming just the front edge ever so slightly, a little semicircle out of it on both sides, sliding it in place and testing it. Once you get that where it's a nice snug fit and it's slid in place, and I like to make it where this crossbar is just inside the main uprights, slightly just past where the bend is. You can see where the bend starts, and I have this crossbar on the front and back connecting right past the bend, so you know it's nice and square. I'll put a couple tacks on one side, go ahead, trim this side with the semicircle in it, tack it, and then before I weld everything up, obviously I'll measure from this front edge of this cross brace to the opposite rear edge of the other cross brace to make sure everything's square. Then I'll put some good heavy tacks on it and start on the front cage. We're back with the install of the plate style interior bar. As you can see, the two cross bars are mounted in location, and I like to put those just inside the bend. The center bar is in there. You can run that if you'd like. I just tacked it in to hold my main hoops together. I'm going to be removing it, so it's not dead center. What I would do at this time is measure off of your crossbars to get that centered in if you do want to run that center bar. Make sure that your crossbars are running parallel with your main hoop so it looks clean and nice. Now that this is all tacked together, we'll go ahead and start the front cage portion. All right, we're back here. We're installing the plate style interior bar, and I've started the front cage portion of it as it ties down into the dash bar. You can see that it's running nice and parallel all the way across. Where it kicks in meets with my rear crossbar, so they're perfectly across from one another. And then I leave myself just a slight bit of gap from the vertical plate here to where the cage portion ties into the dash bar, and that's so I can get a nice weld around there. Everything's tacked into place. Now when you get this bar, the front fish mouth is already in it where it meets the dash bar. However, the rear portion is left slightly long due to the fact that you may move this center bar slightly rearward or forward depending on your installation. So what you'll need to do is take a miter cut across here outward, and then you can start slowly grinding away. When I do that, I always do a little bit at a time, test fit, a little bit more, test fit. Sometimes I'll even go back 6-7 times before I get the perfect fit. And ideally you want a nice snug fit around your bar like this. You can see here is tight. And having that nice tight fit gives you a better area to weld on when you're done. If you have a big gap to fill, you know, it's going to make your weld A, you know, less structurally sound, and B, it's not going to look as aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to go ahead, fit the other side, and I'll come back and show you the finished product. We're back here with a fully tacked together version of our plate style interior bar. And as you can see, we've got it all mocked up. We've pulled it out of the vehicle. I have the rear crossbars in. They are square to one another, so I measured from here to here, and then from here to here, and made sure those measurements are the same. This bar is square here, putting a 90-degree square on this, making sure that it's equal, measured across, making sure it's centered. This bar is not necessary. You don't have to install it if you don't want to. It's just an added bar that comes with the cage. The same with the two front bars. Those aren't necessary as well. We also added two bars down here that are not included. It's something that we did. One thing, as you can see, where the rear crossbar meets the front cage portion, they're straight across from one another. They're running the same angle as one another. You know, so everything is nice, aesthetically pleasing. It flows. One thing I want to touch on is this crossbar. Once you get your front A-pillars in, you put this crossbar in, and you can slide it forward or backwards, you know, and you'll trim it a little bit if you need to slide it rearward. You want to keep this off the windshield frame just slightly. You can move it closer if you don't ever plan on running a wiper cover, but if you ever plan on running a wiper cover of any type, you want it at least 7.5 inches off the windshield frame. That'll give you enough space for the factory electric wiper motor with the cover, and it'll also, you know, clear a hardtop. This, as it sits, will sit inside a hardtop. You don't have to worry about that. The main hoops are designed to sit at the appropriate height to be inside a hardtop. So anyway, I hope that helped. I hope the video makes sense. And if you have any questions, you can always call us, TOMS Bronco Parts.